My name's Carl Soldering, and I am the owner of Creative Reproductions to Scale, and this is another continuation of some of the video shorts that I'm trying to do to help you with wiring your dollhouse. The last one that we had was on the mini power connector, which is this little unit, and I want to continue with the other power connectors that I have and show you how I got started in deciding that we needed a little bit better power connector than what is now available. If you have a dollhouse that has been wired before, you probably had one of Circuit's junction splices that is mounted on the side of the dollhouse. I think this is an ingenious piece of equipment that Circuit came up with, but it just doesn't meet today's needs. If you are having problems with your lighting, as I find with a number of dollhouses that I go to repair and work on, the first thing that I look at is the junction splice. It tends to break down and lose its connection. So I'm going to show you the power connector that I came up with to replace the junction splice and show you how to replace it. This is generally where it is attached on your dollhouse, is on the bottom skirt of the dollhouse, and it can be run directly into the flat tape. I'm going to take the screwdriver to take the screw out. And of course, this is the plug that goes to the power supply and giving you the power to the dollhouse, or the 12 volts that you have on the AC transformers. All that's holding this in here are a couple of pins. These pins tend not to have enough contact with the copper runs to give you adequate electron flow, and they tend to loosen up in the holes and you lose your connection on these things. One thing that I have done that you can try is to fold back the tape once or twice and then put your junction splice back in place, going through the 3 layers of copper tape, and you can repair your dollhouse and make it work fairly well. But the best thing is to get one of my power connectors, which is made for my whole system is balanced out. I use DC power supplies, not a transformer. And then these work very, very well, and it will work either on the flat tape to make a connection, or it will work with round wire if you prefer using round wire. One thing that I like about this is I have a fuse in line, and on all dollhouses I recommend putting a power connector that does have a fuse running in line, which your junction splice does not have. This is where I would normally mount it. The one thing that I recommend is that it comes back about 1.5 inches, 2 inches, so that when you plug in the plug to the power supply, this is not sticking out and can get hit and then break the connection that's on there. When it's all the way back here, you have the flexibility of the cord itself. So you want to mount it about 1.5 inches back from the back side of the dollhouse, or wherever you're going to be mounting this thing. But we're going to take it from here, and I'm going to show you on the desk workbench exactly how I connect this up. This is the power connector, or the junction splice, that we took off of the dollhouse. And you can see that it has the 2 nails at the back side here, and that's what I feel doesn't make a good enough connection with the flat tape. So I've come up with our power connector, which is the 701-1. This is what you get, is the package. It has the instructions on the inside, and it comes with the power connector and 3 different screws. Your instructions are like this, and it tells you exactly what I'm going to show you on here. I'm going to use this board as being the edge of the dollhouse, and as this one had it had the flat tape on the side there, so I'm going to put a piece of flat tape on here, and I use our guide to line up where that tape belongs. And if you take the guide, set it up on edge, I can run my pencil in the corner of this thing and make a line all the way across that tells me, here's what we did, is I had the pencil in the corner here and we just ran it all the way across to give me a line to show me where the top of the tape would go, which would make it 1 inch from the bottom or floor of the dollhouse. I always put the red to the top or the red to the left when I wire things. So I'm going to set this piece on here, lining up the clear part of the acetate to where I ran the pencil line, and that'll give me an even direction all the way across the room, which is nice because on the gauge it has the different hole configurations for the different components that you would want to put in the dollhouse, such as outlets around, and it has the miniature outlets from Circuit or the miniature house outlets that are kind of a mid-size outlet. It also has the configurations for the ceiling adapters and so forth, which we will use in future videos. In the package itself, when we undo the package, we have those instructions that are in there that will tell you what you need. We have the power connector itself, and we have these 3 screws, 2 small brass screws, and then the 1 panhead screw to put this thing down. We have the jack that the plug from the power supply will go into. I do have the LED, which you saw come on, that shows you that we have current coming to this switch, which is the first thing that I would check when you have a problem with the lights not coming on the dollhouse, is make sure you have power coming to the power connector. You then have this junction block here, which can be used for round wire, or we can connect this to the flat tape. So the first thing we're going to do is connect it to the flat tape, and then we'll show you how we can do it to the round wire as well. I have double stick tape on the back of this thing, so we'll peel off that covering over the double stick tape. I want to put this back a distance so that the plug on our power supply is far enough back, as I said earlier, so that it won't get hit and break that jack off. And we have just a cord that is flexible on the outside edge of the dollhouse. So we're going to position that tape does stick. So it would be about at that location. Now I want to take the end of my tape that's on here and I want to fold it back on itself so that I can have a double layer where I'm putting this into. And if you want to, you can actually fold it back a couple of times. And I will cut this off about here. And then I'm just going to roll it back on itself, and you'll find that it sticks really well that way. Just make sure that you keep things even, because we've got our red contact on the top edge here. And the black one is just following over, and we've got it twisted back on itself so that we are going to have a good connection when we put this down. It has the double stick tape, so we can just put this and line up the two holes that are here to the center of each of the tape runs. And if you notice, I have a little plus on here. We also have a red side on the junction block. So we want the positive to be connected to the red, the negative onto the black. So that'll line up this way. We'll just push it down into place. We've got it pretty well level and the way that we need it. And then I'm going to use the center hole with the big pan head screw. If you have extremely hard wood, I would go ahead and put a little bit of a pilot hole down there. And then we can just use a Phillips screwdriver. And since I didn't get that, let's go ahead and use the pliers. If you're like me, my fingers are too fat to hold that in place. And we'll just screw this thing down. Now you want it down far enough so it starts to move the PC board, but don't tighten it so tight that it's actually going to push it down and possibly break the back there. You've got a lot of padding from the tape, but that double stick tape grabs this thing so it doesn't move at all. It's lined up in there and it's going to be good and tight for us. Where these two little holes are that are lined up to the flat tape now, we're going to again use the pilot hole on our drill, or put a pilot hole in here. And I need my smaller screwdriver. And it's a straight bit. I can just set that right in here. And you want to make sure that you get it down far enough again so that you just start to move the board. Now, because these are really small screws, if you try to over tighten them, or if you don't put a pilot hole in, especially on hardwood, on softwoods, it generally will go in. But on the hardwoods, you'll just twist the brass in half and break those screws. And you need the head of the screw to touch the brass ring that goes around that circle. Missed my hole. And that's all there is to it. We've got that in there good and tight. If we plug in the power supply to it, we know that we have power coming into this. By the way, if the fuse would blow, you don't have the LED working. So you can tell that either the fuse is blown or you don't have power coming into the box. So that would be the first thing you need to check on the dollhouse. For continuing to do this with the round wire, all we need to do is take a piece of our hookup wire, and I use the Kynar wire. I'll strip about 3/8 to 1/2 inch of bare wire on here, and if you notice, it's silver coated, so it will conduct electricity far better than just copper wire itself. I fold this over on itself to get a little bit more connection to it, and you can put, again, red into red. I'll go in here and set it into the hole that's on the front edge of the block. until it hits the gate in the back. Then push down on the plunger, and you'll find that that'll go back about another 1/4 of an inch, and it grabs it nice and tight. Same thing with the black wire. We're going to fold that in half, hit the gate, push down, and then it goes about 1/4 of an inch more, and we're good and tight. Obviously, these are going to either get soldered to the flat tape, which is what I normally will do, or if you're running on with your wiring underneath the dollhouse, which I like to do a lot of my round wiring, I'll bring all of the wires down to the basement, I call it, underneath the dollhouse. In which case I would just drill a small hole through the wood and then fish your wires to the underside of the dollhouse. This is going to be mounted, this way on the dollhouse, so that you have it down here and you'll be drilling the hole through the bottom skirt and then doing the connection back there. But if you are connecting to the flat tape with the round wire, then we would go ahead and strip these off and put them down onto the tape wire. This is how I solder onto the flat tape wire. I use the flat tape wire quite a bit as just a junction strip. And what I can do is make a little bit of a circle right onto the flat tape to remove that mylar coating. And then I'll introduce my solder and give myself a nice little bubble. I left it on there for a while to melt down and grab onto the copper itself. Do the same thing on the black, is make a little bit of a circle to remove that mylar coating. You see the copper showing through there. Then I'll introduce a bubble on there. Now we're going to just put the wire down to there, and of course we need to strip that first. The easiest way to strip the wire is to put your soldering iron down on the wire, melt that insulation a little bit, and then pull the wire away from the soldering iron, and we've got it nicely stripped exactly where we want it to be. And if you notice, I pushed it back a little bit so I can pull the wire out. And I'm going to put it on here and then pull the wire, and we've got that section stripped. Now again, I'm now going to set that on top of the bubble, and I'm going to fold my wire back so that I get a good deposit of solder on top of the wire, and that locks it right down. Then we'll take this one and go the other way, let it melt into that, and kind of fold it back and push it into the puddle, let it set. Take our wire snips, cut off the excess, and then one other thing that I like is I use liquid tape. Liquid tape is just, it's a thick paint, basically, a rubberized paint material that I will cover that junction on here. And that locks or holds the wires in place, and it covers the solder joint that we have on there so it won't corrode. And you have a good solid connection on that. The next power connector that we have, I have actually 4 power connectors. We already talked about the mini in a previous tape. The mini and the power connector we just connected are literally the same things, except that this one has a fuse in line. This is just the jack and the block for connecting the wires. This works really well for your individual room boxes or small displays that you might have. And any dollhouse, I recommend putting this one in. One additional thing is the fuse should match the power supply. So if you have a 2 amp power supply, you should have a 2 amp fuse that's in here. If it's a 1 amp power supply, a 1 amp fuse. And that will protect the power supply and the dollhouse from a short or a possibility of something overheating in the dollhouse. The other power connectors that I have is my junction strip, and it's basically the same thing as the power connector by itself. You've got the jack, you have the fuse. This has a power switch that's on here, and if I take my plug from the power supply, when I turn on the switch, it'll, first of all, has the LED to tell us that this is working, and then will light up all of the lights in your dollhouse. But you have a block here that you can connect individual circuits or individual lights. So I have 12 different ports to be able to connect your 2 wires for each light or each circuit on the side here. Otherwise, you're going to attach this basically the same way as we did on the first piece over here. The other one, again, is identical to the junction strip. This is my switching junction. It too has an LED over here that tells us that we have current coming to the board. We also have a small junction block over here where I can connect a second set of toggle switches without having a power supply connected to it. So it has an added feature there, or we can connect power directly to this block that's there. This gives us 6 individual blocks that have a toggle switch that can switch each one of them on and off. I have this set of lights that are in here. That's one of our LEDs that's on the board over here. So when I throw a toggle switch, we can turn on one circuit or turn on the second circuit, the third, and the fourth. I've got 2 that I haven't connected to anything. But this just gives you individual manual switches. Where would we go from here? We'd go to our remote controls. And that'll be another video that we'll do on showing you how to hook up remote controls.